Drew Thomas Hendricks here. I'm the host of the Legends Behind the Craft podcast. On this show, I talk with leaders in the wine and craft beverage industry. Before we get on with the show, brief sponsor message. Today's episode, sponsored by Barrels Ahead. Barrels Ahead, we help the wine and craft industry scale their business through authentic content. Go to barrelsahead.com today to learn more. You know, last week on the show, I talked with Jeanette Tan. She's founder of QB Winery Solutions. We talked about the biggest mistakes wineries make in setting up their accounting and what KPIs wineries should be looking at to ensure scalability and profits. If you haven't listened to that episode, be sure to check it out and make sure that your KPIs are in line with your goals. Today, super excited to talk with Janell Dusi. Janell is a third-generation owner and winemaker at J Dusi Wines. Welcome to the show, Janell.
Hi, so glad to be here. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for being on. So, Janell, third generation. We got to just hop into it. What's it like?
Okay, well, hold on a second.
What?
It's fourth generation.
Fourth generation.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I had it completely wrong. It's even more impressive. Fourth generation. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, we go even deeper in our roots. My great grandparents came over from northern Italy in the early 1900s, and when they settled here in Paso, it was kind of like, what are the other Italians doing? You know, what are our friends doing? So they were all planting Zin. And in the early 1920s, there was about 5 Italian families that planted Zinfandel here in Paso.
What brought them to Paso?
They like the charcoal. They started making charcoal with all the oak trees and stuff, I believe. Sounds really bad in today's world, but Paso Robles, it was halfway between San Francisco and LA. And it's kind of where they stumbled upon and had a little contingent of Italians from northern Italy that were all here.
Oh, wow.
And they all started planting Zin. Fortunately, ours are still intact and all 150 acres are still here and producing.
And where did they planted 150 acres, and this is on the west side of Paso.
It is pretty much on the west side of Paso. They planted 40 acres, 40 to 50 off Ramada in 1925. And then they planted another 100 acres, which is the vineyard I grew up on and live on today on the other side of the highway in 1945. So, over 20 years, they planted the 100.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. So what was it like growing up on the vineyard?
I grew up a farmer's daughter, so it was 3 generations ahead of me that were farmers. And I was, I lived in the middle of 100 acres of old vines in. So I lived in the middle of dirt. And back here in Paso Robles in the 80s, it was not a thing. Wineries were not all around us. It was kind of like, oh yeah, you're that kid on the vineyard over there, and we were farmers. My dad was actually a wheat and barley farmer and did the grapes on the side.
Oh, wow.
But I had 2 older brothers and we were just extra sets of hands. We were pure like extra labor for him. So I grew up in the dirt and it was blood, sweat, and tears out there. And I just was like, guys, why, we pick all these grapes, we work so hard all year long and they go off the driveway and that's it. And all these other people have wine and, do these things. So I was 12 years old and I said, I want to make wine. And my dad said, no, you're crazy. We're farmers. We're not winemakers.
And he hadn't dabbled. No one previously was dabbling in home wine?
My great uncle did in the 50s when grape prices, back in the 50s, Americans didn't drink a lot of red wine. Yeah. So when the grape prices went down, my great grandfather, Sylvester, said, Benito, you're going to start making wine, So he started making wine, got some redwood tanks in the cellar and on the property, started making wine. And about 7 years later, when grape prices went back up, my great grandfather told him, all right, Benito, you can close the door if you want. So they went back to just being farmers in the late 50s.
Oh, wow.
So technically I'm 4th generation, the first one to make wine in the family in 60 years.
That's amazing. So you're 12 and you're like, I'm going to make some wine. How did you go about doing that?
Well, I begged and pleaded my grandfather to teach me the basics. My dad wanted no part in it. He is a true farmer at heart, and that's what he loves and breathes, and it's his passion. So I thought it was crazy. My grandfather thought it was a fun project, and it was really basic. It was picking the grapes that were outside my house. It was stomping them, fermenting them, putting them in a barrel. Bought my own 15-gallon French oak barrel when I was young because I raised pigs and used money and bought a new barrel. And I just bottled it however it turned out. It wasn't like I was blending and trying to make the best creation or the best Zinfandel I could make. I was purely just making Dusi Zin from 1992, kind of something like that. So, and I entered it in our local amateur winemaking contest here. I think they thought probably I was turning the wine in for somebody else who had entered, but didn't know it. A 13-year-old at the time was entering homemade wine. Printed it up in the newspaper, and I have the newspaper hanging in the tasting room now.
Oh, that's cool. How did you do on that?
I got honorable mention.
Nice.
It was probably the lowest medal they gave out, but hey, they printed my name in the newspaper and said honorable mention. So,
First time they didn't tell you to get out.
right? Yeah, I think it's a win.
No, that's fantastic. So 13, first wine. And then what? I mean, it just progressed from there.
Through high school, I made a little batch every year in my grandfather's garage, and it was fun. And I gave it away as gifts. I was bringing it to school and giving it to teachers, and they're like, sweet. And then through high school, I got this mentorship program. So I would get these men, the group of men that met about winemaking, and they'd pick me up. And I was 16 years old. We'd go to these meetings, and I look back like, Mom, what were you thinking? You let me just go with like the local pharmacist to the local town meetings of wine. And she goes, I know, it was crazy, but it was so harmless. And the town was so small back then that it was no big deal. But then through college, I toured Davis. I did not end up going, and I didn't apply actually. I went to UC Santa Barbara and made wine in the garage every year. And I went
study at UC Santa Barbara.
Global and international studies.
Now, what was your goal there? Was it did you think you were going to become a winemaker, or
I loved wine. I went to Davis in high school thinking I'm going to go here. I want to make wine. And when I toured there, it was so heavy on the viticulture, and I grew up a farmer's daughter. And it was like, I want to do enology. And here in San Luis Obispo, Cal Poly didn't offer enology at that time, just viticulture. I was like, I don't want to go to college for farming. I did that my whole life. So I went to UC Santa Barbara. I loved to travel. I knew I wanted to travel and make wine other places. And I love just different countries. And so we learned a lot about exporting, importing, things like that. Really studied the regions and got a degree in international studies, which was the first year of that degree. My parents and my brothers make a lot of fun of me saying, not really, it's a real degree, but hey, I got a college degree. So
studying internationally.
Yeah, but then I went and worked in Australia, in the Barossa Valley, and traveled a bunch.
That right after college or in college?
After college.
After college, so you went right back into following your dream of wine.
Yeah, immediately after college, I came up here and started working at Turley. I went to South Australia, got an internship. It was 7 days a week, 12-hour shifts. It was intense. And to do 2 vintages in a year, follow that crush from Southern Hemisphere to Northern Hemisphere. So it was contagious, and I loved it. And I grew up farming. So I grew up hands-on, and that's my winemaking style today. It's very hands-on and learn by doing.
Sure. When came back from Australia, when did the first kind of vintage of J Dusi come out?
2006 was my first vintage. I always say for legal sale because I did all the right paperwork. But I started with Zin, of course, because that's what I had and what I knew and grew. So I started with a Zinfandel, a Zin Rosé, and a Zinfandel Port.
Oh, nice.
And then from there, did a couple of Zin-based blends, which, Zin's my house palette, I think, as well. So that's what I grew up with. So I feel like it's really ingrained in me. And now I've branched off because I have the luxury of playing with new things, having a little spice rack in the cellar now, and I have my own stuff. So it's been fun to grow, but definitely my heart and my roots are with Zinfandel and my passion for sure.
And that's like back I got in the wine industry in early 90s, and we always just equated Paso with Zin. And nowadays it's just so much broader with Cab and all the Rhone varietals.
Seriously, those 3, it's crazy because our history is Zinfandel. It's what our base is and what got Paso Robles known to be a great grape growing region is Zin. But Rhones are fantastic here in our soil and our topography here.
All the work
Cabernet is actually the whitest varietal planted here. So
I learned that. I was talking to Janell Dusi. I mistakenly said Cabernet. You don't normally think of Paso, and he quickly corrected me. That that's what by far the most planted.
Yeah, we're like an area known for 3 strong varietal.
So as far as Zin, talk to me about your Zin and the kind of your house style.
I think when I talk about my house palette being Zin, I grew up with Zinfandel from a long, long time ago. It was much more that restrained style. I almost call it old world style because it wasn't that high alcohol, high jam, high bombastic, crazy Zinfandel. It was old world style. And for an example, in the process of my grandfather teaching me how to make wine, the wine sitting in a barrel, I'm like, okay, now what do we do? I know we have to top or something. And he went and grabbed the garden hose. And he's like, here we go. This is topping it up. And I'm like, what? I don't think that's the right thing to do, And I think we go back and visit our family in northern Italy, and we bring all these like Turleys, Dusis in, and we're so proud that the Dusi name is on all these
I remember that.
huge Zinfandels, and they're like, oh my God, it's 16% alcohol. They can't even drink it because the lifestyle of old world is sit at lunch for 4 or 5 hours and drink 6 bottles of wine, 12, 13, 14% alcohol, low alcohol, where you have all the complexity and the flavors and the profile of that varietal. So what I really strive to do in my Zinfandel is to pick it at a little bit leaner, a little lower bricks. So you're not getting that high alcohol, high jam, but rather that bright fruit, a little bit of spice. Nice. So I really refer to my Zins as medium bodied and restrained in style. And another big part of my Zinfandel is I hope to not overshadow it or with oak, which can easily be done with Zin. So my oak regime is only about 10% new oak on the Zin and mostly French with a little bit of American or maybe some hybrid barrels in there. But I think oak can really overshadow the fruit, and fruit is, out of all the varietals, I think Zin is the most notorious for the fruit shining through. So I really want to capture that. And for my family, we're in the vineyards every day. I want to show our hard work. I want to show what the soil is doing with those old vines and not mask it with anything. So my winemaking style is all native ferments. I don't use any yeast and I don't do any additives or anything. So I really want to show the pureness of our hard work in the vineyard and let you see what happened in the Dusi Vineyard in 2019. Was it too much rain? Was it too much wind at springtime? Was it not enough rain, a drought, which you can see those minuscule little details come through by vintage if you do it that way.
I do miss the year-to-year variability that I used to see in a lot of wines. Winemaking's become so scientific, and it just seems like the consistency, especially in California wines, it's very hard to tell one vintage from another.
Yeah.
Walk us through. So I'm excited to hear a little bit about this. You can do it very generally, but like over the last 4 vintages, how has the flavors evolved by allowing the vineyard just to express itself?
I think certain years we can have, no one thinks about too much wind during April and May when the grapes are blossoming, can blow the blossoms off and stunt the growth. And so you're getting this mixed bag on a cluster, and that can hurt the grapes. So you can definitely see the difference in them. This year, 21, we were in a drought. And so our production yields were down 40% pretty much. And hopefully we get some more concentration from that. But I have to walk a fine line between grape grower and wine because I buy the fruit for my family, which I'm a partner in as well. But it's like, sweet, the vineyard's down 40%. We're going to have more concentration, more this. And then it was like, oh, well, then we're down 40% of our yields and our money, things like that. It's always a fight every year with me and my dad. And I'm trying to wear both hats on those things. But yeah, it's definitely what I want to show is vintage, what happens with Mother Nature. And that's what it comes down to is Mother Nature. I definitely have a wine, a $15 screw cap red I put in the grocery stores only, that my goal is to make that taste the same every year.
Yeah.
And maybe I do probably use a yeast and some additives in that $15 bottle. But in the classic Dante Dusi Zinfandel or vineyard designated, I want to show all those intricacies that happened over the course of the year with Mother Nature and express that in the vintage.
How many wineries are making Dusi Zin?
Quite a few. From Benito Dusi, which is the 1925 vineyard, Ridge gets most of the grapes, about 95% of it. And we've been selling to Ridge Vineyards since 1967.
Wow.
So every single year, all in a handshake, they do the
That was the first Dusi I tried when I started in the industry.
Yeah. And they'll take as many grapes as they can get. And it's awesome. I'm able to squeeze a little bit of the vineyard out now, a little bit of the grapes, make 100% Benito. And I also make a dual blend of the 2 vineyards. But
and they're in that more European style of drinking Zin.
Absolutely. And I love how they break down their label. You know, there's 3% Carignan, a little bit of Alicante Bouschet, because that's what is old vine Italian field blend of vineyards that were planted in the 20s and 30s and back in the day, which I think is so cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we're not here to talk about Ridge, but I do have to say their label has always been my favorite. It gives you just the facts. It really
classic. Yeah.
It is classic.
Yeah. Yep. The Dante Dusi Vineyard, the vineyard planted in 1945. I buy about 20% of that vineyard, and the rest of it is pretty much goes to Turley since the late 90s, as well as Tobin James since probably the early 90s or maybe late 80s.
And I guess Turley would be the opposite expression of what I remember of Dusi. I remember when the first time I had Turley Dusi was, I think in 98 or 96. And that was the first time that we really saw that 17, 18% alcohol. I think
And I think
Aaron Jordan was doing some bionic yeast or something at the time.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's uncontrollable when it comes in. It's hard to catch it, especially dry farms in. You can't just, when you get a heat spell of over 100 degrees close to harvest, you can't just turn the irrigation on and let it ride it out. Those sugars climbing, you're going to have to deal with that. And that's going to directly relate to high alcohol. But I think even their winemaking style has changed a little bit and, come down a little bit.
It's just amazing. The same vineyard, so many different expressions of the varietal.
Yeah, my favorite thing to do, we do now for staff parties, is get 2019 Dusi's in from multiple.
That's what I was getting to.
Yeah, love it. It's so cool. You can still see the underlying characteristic of the vineyard, and then just different winemaking styles on it, and oak regime, how they can be so different.
That would be a fun tasting. They do a lot of like location ones, but a vineyard specific, and to have that many options. What do you see the common denominator between all the different ones?
It's definitely the fruit. The fruit that comes through. It's almost like this tart cranberry cherry cola kind of thing that is so distinctly Dusi Vineyard. Depending on, Tobin James likes it really, really ripe. So they like that jammier one. We sell a little bit to Mike Price Myers. We've been selling to Ledge, Stephen Ross, quite a few other people, and they like a little bit leaner to try and stay away from those flavor profiles. But it's the fruit that definitely someone yesterday in the taste room was like, I had a wine and I said, this is Dusi. And it was a Dover Canadian, a really small guy that gets like 2 tons a year or something. And I'm like, yeah, it's cool.
That is awesome. Talking about like different expressions, you've got a new vineyard project coming up, Paper Street, that also has a few different people producing wines.
Yes, we sold about 10 different producers off that vineyard. And again, I buy 20%, but this is the very first vineyard that my family has planted from the ground up. So we own about 5 other vineyards in town. The 2 big Dusi ones have been handed down by generations to my dad. Other ones we've bought that were great, needed some TLC. We got in there and revamped them and had these vineyards. But Paper Street is a vineyard, actually a piece of property we bought that we started from the ground up. So bought some raw land and planted it. And there's about 106 planted acres up there now. Wow. And what's so cool about this property is that it's about 1,000 feet higher elevation than we are now. Than our other vineyards. So the high elevation, the steep, rugged terrain is just intense and rugged and just special, but dangerous and gnarly and scary at the same time.
Oh yeah. I mean, I've looked at the video. It sits right on the top of that hill. When you guys were thinking about planting it and organizing it, what did you take into consideration, and what's some of the things you're most proud of how that vineyard's operating?
Going up here for the first time, it's about 20 minutes up this dirt road. That's not even a road. It's like a glorified ditch of a road. And I were just getting to the top and being like, oh my God, what are my dad and my brothers thinking with this property? How are you going to get fruit down this mountain? So they had the wherewithal and the foresight to look at it and be like, this is going to be amazing. Look at all of our neighbors up here producing top quality fruit from the land around it. Was it
just brush at the time? Completely unfarmed?
Yeah, and there was about it's a 350 acre piece of property, and about 20 acres of almond trees were up there that had been neglected for about 40 years. So my dad was like, hey, they're still holding on. There's something magical up here because those haven't been touched in 40 years and they're still doing okay. So that was up there, but my brother and dad didn't want to plant this vineyard without having like some contracts or some people who wanted it, because that's a big endeavor. So they got Price Myers at the time was buying some fruit from us, and they respect him and his quality and his winemaking and his passion.
Big fan of his Paper Street Zin.
Yeah, he's an amazing winemaker.
More than a few bottles.
He was on board. He saw the property. He was like, yes, I'm in. And so we really relied on him a lot and collaborated with him of like, what varietals would you want to see? North, south, east, west exposure, what varietals would go well where? And so they collaborated a lot on the planting of the vineyard, and he signed up. He takes about 50% of the fruit.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Now, when you did the planting, what type of vines were you doing? Head pruned like your other vineyards? Or
it was a mix of everything. We really tried to see what varietals did well with what style. And I was learning by trial and error, I guess. Of course, the Zinfandel we planted was head pruned and, not trellis. We did that to the Carignan, the Petit Syrah, and the Zinfandel up there. And the Grenache Blanc and Grenache are all head trained. And then we quickly realized that the Carignan was not thriving in that way. And, the canes are super, super long and falling over in the wind. So we went in and added trellis system to the Carignan, and everything else is doing really well, the old world style. So there's a little mix of everything. We're really trying to do what was best for each varietal.
Oh, that's neat. And your label is Paper Street. When was the first vintage of that?
2015, I did magnums only for just 4 barrels. And then 2016, I released 3 separate wines. So as 100% Zinfandel, 100% Mourvedre, and a GSM blend. Oh. And I mean, I didn't plan on doing 100% Mourvedre at all, but I was like tasting it by the barrel, being blown away. It was nuts. It was like,
what was it like? What the expression?
It had like this balance of like earth, but yet this candy finish almost, not sweet. And I don't need to use candy that way, but it just had this intriguing fruit component to it that just made you want more. And I remember someone in the tasting room was like swirling it in their glass at the tasting and just being like, this is what I want at midnight on New Year's Eve. And I was like, yeah, that's it. Yeah. So I've been, fortunately, years after that, even through 2020, I've been bottling that Mourvedre 100% by itself.
Well, that sounds delicious.
Yeah.
Now, how old are those vines now?
Those were planted in 2013.
Okay.
So I mean, it's so cool to have the Dante Dusi Vineyard planted in 1945. We took those cuttings, put it on resistant rootstock over at the nursery, and then took that Zin cuttings and planted them 1,000 feet higher at Paper Street. So every vintage now, I have a 2020 Dante Dusi Zin and the 2020, Paper Street Zinfandel, which are essentially the same canes, but planted in such different sites that it's so cool to compare and contrast. And not saying I'm picking a favorite over one or the other, but they really speak about place of site, about the terroir, about the soil that they're grown in. That's really interesting and unique.
How are they different?
The Dante Dusi Zin, it's so restrained and has a little bit of spice from year to year in between Christmas spice or white pepper or something kind of on the finish of that vineyard, tangles between those two flavor profiles, where every varietal I get off Paper Street, when it hits my crush pad, it's just different. It's, I think, a little bit thicker skin because it's higher elevation. Maybe it's darker from the initial squeeze of it. And when I start fermenting it, it's darker, it's bigger, it's bolder, even though you have 1945 and 2013 plantings.
Yeah.
Those new plantings are just, they're just a different animal, and the color, I do nothing to the color, and it's just intense and deep and dark. And you just want to look at it and taste it and smell it. It is.
Yeah. It's a very jammy, at least the ones that I've had.
Yeah.
Now,
we're intense fruit on that one.
Yeah. On managing 2 brands, let's talk about more of the sales aspect of kind of the J Dusi Wines and Paper Street.
Yeah, I started with the J Dusi. I have about 8 of those wines in the lineup, and they're all silkscreen labels. So it's my way of defining the difference of the two is that Paper Street has, of course, a paper label. It's white. It's really cool looking. It has pictures from the vineyard up there. And we call Paper Street a vineyard designated series by J Dusi. And I just want to showcase this vineyard. I want to highlight how extreme it is, how difficult it is, and how much of a lifestyle difference it is. It's completely different than any farming and anywhere else we do. And I want to highlight it.
How so?
What was that?
How so? The difference between one's being on the hill, one's down on the bottom.
It's steep. It's so rugged. It's hard to get to. The fact, like, it's a 1 lane, like a bike trail when we got there, and it's about 20 minutes of this. And you can't take a big truck up there. We have a gooseneck or a 10-ton truck we bring grapes down on, and you can't take 4-wheelers in certain spots because it's too steep and too gnarly. My brother left his finger up there.
I'm trying to envision where I guess I could look it up, but I'm trying to envision that. So do you pass by other farms when you go down this 20-minute road? Or
there's nothing up there. When it becomes an unmaintained road, there's nothing else really up there. And it goes through from Kyler Canyon all the way to Peachy Canyon Road.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's the mountain that goes through the top, and you would go by the Viking Vineyard from Adelaida up there. You look straight across at Law, which is really far away, but it's an unmaintained road, and there's a reason for it. But we've been there, since 2013. My brother has a trucking company, and he loves big, heavy machinery. So whenever my dad's out of town, he takes the dozer up there and tries to make the road all nice and
right up his alley.
Yeah, we made it better, but it's still just a difficult feat to get fruit down from there and get our equipment up there and to get, workers to come back the next day to pick grapes, because it is straight up and down on a lot of pieces where it's challenging and it's difficult and
amazing logistics that needs to happen there.
And it was so hot this year that we started night picking at vineyards. We started at midnight this year, every day up there. So it was like one more step of danger on that vineyard was picking in complete darkness, but it was worth it because it was too hot to pick otherwise, and to preserve the grapes was great. But it's an intense piece of property. So you have to look at the video, and that doesn't show depth perception that well, but I get a little sense of how steep those mountainsides are.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So talking about the heat during harvest this year, which was I was up there right around that time.
Oh, you were?
How did the 22 harvest go for you?
It was good. It was interesting. I want to say it's good, but then on the farming hat side of it, it was like, well, we were down 35-40%. So it wasn't that great, but I think the quality is good. There's a little bit of challenges in the cellar right now on maybe, 5% of the stuff, which we're still working through right now, but I really like the flavor profiles on a lot of things. I lost some, unfortunately, my biggest loss right now is the Movedra.
Oh no.
Yeah, we're replanting a section of it. So hopefully I'll have enough to make 100% again this year. But it was quick. It was fast harvest. It was super early. We wasn't ready for it. I was still in the middle of a canning project and was like, oh my gosh, grapes are coming tomorrow. We got to get this, get going. Get everything clean and ready. And so it was really, really early, and it just went by fast.
What canning project?
The heat ripened everything fast, but also having less grapes to pick made it fast. What was the last question?
You said you were in a canning project. What was?
Yeah, I have a canning project with these girls called Maker. Have you heard of them?
No, but it sounds fascinating.
Yeah, there's these 3 Stanford grad girls started this project, and they called it Maker. And they don't make any of the wine, but they seek out winemakers throughout. I was going to say California, but I think they just got their first Washington or Oregon one. But most of them are either female winemakers or minority winemakers, and something special. So when they approached me, I was like, because I make a lot of Pinot Grigio every year, and I was like, yeah, I'd love to make Pinot Grigio in a can. It'd be great. Like, no. They're like, we want your good stuff. We want what you're known for. And to me, I was like, but that's expensive, that was and they're like, yeah, we're going to pay top dollar per gallon for it and collaborate with you. And they're charging $14 a can. And it's yeah. So they're really trying to break that barrier of wine doesn't have to be cheap in a can. You can have a really great glass of wine. And, they're really cute labels on these cans. And so mine has the Paper Street Mountains. It's 100% Zin, of course. Cool. It's 50% Dusi Zin, 50% Paper Street Zin, which I'm kicking myself because I love the blend so much that I'm like, why didn't I do this?
Yeah.
But so it has the mountains on it and the truck on it, and it's amazing. I love the Zin in there, and
I love that canned wines are coming into their day. I mean, for all the camping we do, all the traveling to the beach and everything, it makes so much sense, especially if you're buying it to drink it.
Yeah, I was on a train ride the other day, and I was like, perfect. I'm bringing a can, pop it open. I don't need a glass. I need a corkscrew to travel with. And yeah, it's been doing it really well. The funniest part is that the labels are really cute. And my dad is a club member now from them, and he drinks a can every night. I'm like, really, Dad? He's like, well, your mom doesn't want to drink wine, and it's a glass and a third, so it's a perfect, and it's good wine. So I can have a good one glass of wine each night. And so I think it's pretty funny.
That's nice, because if you open the bottle, you end up drinking the bottle. But
yes, exactly.
If you open the can, you're going to drink the can. You're like, okay, it's done.
Exactly. Yeah, it's perfect.
No, I think I love that trend. So happy you're on board. I got to check out this maker line.
And the wines are good, all of them. I'm a member too with them.
That's the key. Even I want to see more box wine. I mean, high-end box wine. I know. I was just up at Tablas, and they did a 3-liter box of their Paddle.
I know. My brother keeps sending me messages. You need to do this with a Pinot Grigio.
No, I think it's so smart, like for ecology and for transportation. If you're going to be drinking it over the course of the week,
it makes total sense. It's perfect.
No, I love all this alternative packaging. I want to talk about your winemaking for a second. And since your first vintage up until now, over the last 10, my math is bad, 7, 8, 10 years of your wine, how has it evolved?
I think it's evolved because I'm reaching out and branching out beyond just Zinfandel and having fun playing with other varietals. I'm also learning what varietals I like to work with, which
Mhm.
ones are a challenge for me, which, could be the vineyard, could be a lot of things, but I always find it funny when everyone's like, oh my God, Zinfandel, I hate, it's the hardest varietal to make. And I laugh because I'm so comfortable with it. And
Uh-huh.
I feel like I know it so intimately that, I still live on that vineyard where these vines touch my bedroom window, that's who I am. So, and I think that's a big thing on the winemaking side. And I went through a time where I was like, should I grow? Should I do this? Should I do that? I'm like, no, I'm really comfortable where I'm at now because I can still
Mhm.
have my hands in all of everything. It's just me and two guys that do olive harvest. We do about
Oh,
105 tons a year, and we're the only ones touching every single
oh my
grape. And I love that part because that's how I grew up and that's how I feel
Mhm.
comfortable is hands on with the grapes. So I knew I didn't want to grow, but I wanted to focus on more quality. If it can even get better, can I do
Uh-huh.
even better? So paying more attention, and of that, I learned to do more lab analysis more often just to make
Mhm.
sure everything's staying on track and just getting deeper in and taking care of the wines every
Absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, on your site, you talk about wine is part art, part science, and 100% passion. And I always like to talk to winemakers, like where does the art end and the science begin? And as you produce more and more vintages, does the art just take over a little bit more because the science is dialed in?
No, I think it still stays for me. I think it still stays the
Mhm.
same because a lot of the artistic part is, I feel like, even more in the beginning where you have to like create these things. Now I
Mhm.
know the path that the blends I want to do, and I know what all my vineyard sourcing is
Mhm.
100% from family owned vineyards. So I know these vineyards, I know the
Mhm.
soil, I know I can predict what's going to happen. So the art now is playing with new varietals or new
Uh,
ideas, which I did do this year. I have a couple new varietals I'm working with, which is the fun part because everything else I'm used to. I don't
mhm.
want to say it gets boring, but it's always fun to reach out and play with new varietals. But, I think the more part is new things are happening too. Technology is getting better.
Mhm.
Not that I use too much crazy stuff at all, but like I said, just staying more on top of the wines and making sure nothing gets out of sight because wine, living organism, and I
Yeah.
want to keep it nice and tight and keep it up.
Yeah. I think that the science really drives the art. Like
Yeah.
you've got an artistic vision and you've got all these tools, which is science, that help you
Yeah.
like realize that vision.
And then you have the customer, and they're in your
And you have
ear
the
too. So then you have that
yeah,
aspect of it.
when to listen and when to say, nope, nope, you're wrong.
Yeah. And I feel like the question's always like, what are you doing next? What's new? And I was like, isn't this great with, it's a
Mhm.
new vintage and things like that. So I do feel feedback from them is like, they always want a little something new and seeing what's coming up. What else is down the
Mhm.
pipeline?
Got anything else under the cabinet? Yeah, no, that's don't want to ask what's new, but like some of the varietals that you're branching out into, what's some of the more exciting things that you're looking forward and experimenting with?
Yeah, I'm gonna do a rosé off Paper Street. So I did
Uh-huh.
some Seigneurs off the Paper Street Reds this year that
Mhm.
I'm gonna do for that. Usually, I throw it in the regular rosé and
Mhm.
stuff. So I'm gonna keep it all separate. So I'm excited to do that. I did a Grenache Blanc for the first time this year
Oh,
and Plain Mountain with some Cab Franc.
oh, the Cab Franc.
Yeah, so I don't know where it's gonna end up, the Cab
Uh-huh.
Franc, or how I'm gonna use it, but it was just a ton of it. My brother grows it, and it's new that he did a replant on, and I was like, I need some of that. So I had to like beg and plead for him to let go of a ton. I pay
Where,
for it, of
sure.
course.
Where's the Cab Franc from? That's from the Dusi Vineyard too?
He has a vineyard about a mile down from us on the west
Mm.
side, right on the corner of like the 101 and 46 West.
Oh yeah.
Is his vineyard, and I always get some grapes from him, and he replanted the Syrah to Cab Franc. And I was like, I really, really, really want to mess around with that and see how it goes.
And that can be very, I mean, the flavor profile of that can vary greatly depending on the area. How is that expressed in his vineyard?
It's really, really new. 22 was the first
Oh,
year I got
oh
some.
wow.
So it's
Okay.
really just brand new for me. I've been seeing it more around here in Paso Robles, and every blend I have with it in with my peers that do it. I love the wine. I think it's really cool. I think it's a little more interesting than the cabs, and I kept at bay with that. So messing around with some Cab Franc, I think it's going to be pretty fun.
Oh, that'll be neat. Now,
Yeah.
as we talked about the art and the science, the passion. Over the years, how do you stay motivated and passionate? What drives you?
Knowing that I grew up on this land, on this property, something that has been here for 4 generations and it's getting passed down. And that I'm buying these grapes and making wine and I'm turning it back out with our family name on it and having a tasting room that's open 7 days a week and seeing people talk about Zin, or they see the name on the side of the road. They're like, oh my God, you guys are known for Zin, and they pull in, and it makes me happy and then they're happy. But also we were some of the first vineyards here in Paso. Still here. We're still here. We're still farming. Yeah, we're making some wine now, but we're keeping that generation, those roots still going and not tearing those vineyards out. Makes me really proud. And it's been fun. We're all still a big family that is all 100% involved, which is awesome.
That's so good to hear. I love hearing those stories. Talking about fourth generation OG and Paso, it's changing dramatically every time I drive through. Where would you like to see Paso evolve over the next 20 years? Or how would you? What caution would you want to shout out to people? Stop doing that.
Right. I love the mix that Paso has of really small boutique wineries. And, I'm respectful for the ones that are the large corporations here because they really are putting the Paso Robles name on the map, and they're in all 50 states. And so people are coming here because they have all those big guys on the grocery store shelves. So it benefits all of us, but I love our balance. We have so many wineries here in Paso that I haven't been to almost half of them because there's just so many. But, between the winery that has 2 barrels with a wooden plank on it serving wine because people love it, and the owners behind the bar, you still have that here in Paso. And I love that. And, if people sell their house in LA and want to come here and have a gentleman's vineyard, they realize quickly that it's a lot of work and it's not just all fun. So I just hope that we can just get genuine people that really love it here and respect the land and respect the place and not get too blown up or not too big in our own pants about it. But keep it real.
Keeping the mix, I think, is important. Like it is okay to have, there's going to be a tasting room for every kind of desire and palate and budget, but it's good to have some areas like Napa, you can't find there's no middle.
No, we hear that a lot. Yeah. People come here and it's hard to go up there now.
No, I love Paso is one of my favorite places to visit. What advice would you have I know a lot of wine drinkers listen to this podcast. What advice would you have for someone visiting the region for the first time?
Oh, visiting to Paso. Wow. I thought you were going to say you could place yourself or something. Coming to Paso, no, I don't think you're going to strike out anywhere. The wine quality is so good at so many places here, but I do think it's cool to visit all the different size wineries, visit a mom and pop winery, visit somebody in the middle that might have a little distribution like myself, that I'm in like 8 states. You might have seen it in Southern California, but come to the winery. We all have more wines that are smaller boutique wines in the tasting room. And then go to one of the big guys. They're fancy. They have lunches. They have all these things. They're pretty, but it really shows you the diversity of Paso. And I think that you'll be surprised at the quality and how great across the board a lot of our wines coming out of Paso are.
That's great advice. Yeah. I'm excited to see more people tour the region.
Absolutely. Yeah. It was going crazy great, but now everything's stopped in its tracks a little bit. We're slowly coming back. And what the greatest thing about the pandemic did was push us outside. Paso Robles typically is pretty nice weather. If it's hot, it might be too hot, but we're never usually that cold. And now instead of standing at a bar facing the tasting attendants, people are outside, and our patio is 10 feet away from the vineyard. So you're overlooking the vineyard tasting wine. And I was like, why didn't we ever do this before? It just seemed like outside was too cold or too hot. And we have umbrellas and it's great. And it's so pretty. And these oak trees are everywhere. So you're out looking at vineyards, tasting the grapes tasting the wine that come from those grapes. And you can't beat it. Why wouldn't you want a vacation or be local and meet a girlfriend out here for a glass of wine, or have your kids run around? And I mean, that's not the greatest, but.
No, that sounds fantastic. Janell, as we're wrapping down, where can people find out more about you and J Dusi and Paper Street?
Yeah, it's all on one website. It's jdusiwines.com, and Dusi is DUSI. Plug that in, you'll probably find it. And there are hours in there. We're open 7 days a week. Like I said, you come out, we taste wines, we have couches, we have tables and chairs outside in the sunshine amongst the vines, which is pretty awesome.
Awesome. I am definitely stopping by next time I'm in town.
Yeah, you have to.
Well, Janell, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
You have a great day.
You too. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Legends Behind the Craft podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.